Welcome to day 5. Today, we are talking about words, words, words. Everyone's favorite topic. Words are the foundation of language. Each language is made up of hundreds of thousands of words. In most spoken languages, there are around 3 words per second. That's crazy. That means they're going to be your biggest obstacle in the whole process. You're going to need to know lots of words to be able to understand people. And learning grammar is going to be essentially useless until you know enough words to follow along. If I show you a sentence in German and say, this grammar is interesting because you have to say der Frau instead of die Frau to mean that it's the woman's car, which changes. That probably means nothing to you since all of these words are completely meaningless unless you're learning German. Maybe you recognize Auto, but that's probably it. But if I show you something in English and say, that's the woman's car, and then I talk about the fact that there's 2 different apostrophe S's here, and they serve different purposes. One of them is the shortened version of that is, and the other one is marking possession, to rather whose car it is. That's a lot easier to follow and understand because you already know all the words. You subconsciously know the grammar as well because it makes sense. But maybe you've never thought about it before. I'm just showing you something that you basically already know and then giving it a name. This is all to say that words are the first step in the process, and you'll need to learn lots of them since they unlock the rest of the language. But how many, to be more specific? Right now, your goal is to reach 2,000 words known. That's more or less when you can start to understand and follow along with things. 2,000 words covers the core of the language and allows you to focus on those extra words that actually contain the meat of the meaning. Then, once you've learned a further 1,500 words, so around 3,500 in total, you'll be able to use tools in order to follow along with most things. The keywords that you need will still probably have to be lookups, but this is around the point that you reach that fun threshold in the language since you're not as concerned with the basics of the language. And this is the real goal for most of you, since going beyond 3,500 words then just becomes easy and fun. At that point, though, your goal does sort of reach to more about 5,000 words, because that's the point when daily conversation is achievable. You can do a lot of daily things without a dictionary if you know 5,000 words. In English, this is the range where you'll find words like underestimate or startle, right? Words that aren't that common, but they definitely come up enough that basically everyone should know them since you'll hear them in conversations. After that, you're looking at reaching 8,000 words since that's about the point when you can read novels. And let me tell you, as a reading fan, being able to just to pick up a book in your target language and read it feels amazing. The last milestone for learning is beyond 8,000 words because those will just come up from time to time and you'll get more comfortable and confident in more topics as you go. If you keep going, reading and studying, you may reach 10, 15, 20,000 words, which is around the level of a native speaker. You'll just keep learning more words because at that point it becomes just a thing you do. It's easy. Daily words come up and you just learn them. How long will this take? First, let's redefine our current target. You're going to become comfortable with the written language right now with the help of tools. So our goal is to reach that 3,500 level. We found that explicitly studying 10 words per day is very achievable for most people. Plus, you'll pick up the easy words through the immersion process. So think about words like this, his, are, went. You don't really need to study those super hard. By the way, these are all very much guesses we're making. They're educated guesses, but some people may take half the amount of time and others may take even more. It's all about the number of hours and how you spend them to learn these words. But we're confident that these educated guesses are quite achievable for most people. For close languages, getting to that 3,500 word level takes about 6 months. You're able to pick up around 1,700 or so simple words through immersion, plus another 1,800 explicit words that you would then learn through 10 words per day. These are for languages like Spanish, French, or Italian, where there's a lot of shared words with English. For languages that are a bit further away, You're going to have to do a little more explicit study, so it'll take you more like 9 months to reach 3,500. This is for languages like Russian or Hindi, things that aren't super related to English, but also not insanely different or difficult. And then finally, if you're studying a language that's very distant from English, you're going to have to explicitly study basically every single word, which means that at 10 words per day, it'll take you the better part of a whole year. So for something like Japanese or Mandarin. If you're at all fearful of this, since you're finding new words to be very difficult right now, don't worry. It gets much, much easier as you go for one big reason. The more words you know, they provide extra context and support to help you learn even more. Plus, your brain right now is still struggling to understand how to store these words and how to conceptualize them in your mind. But in a few short months, you'll be learning 10 to 15 words per day, no problem, as you get used to the process. So, if we need to reach these lofty big numbers, how do we do that? I've been talking about 10 words per day. How does somebody learn 10 words per day? This goes back to the priming or preparation we talked about the other day. When learning new words, you actually need to be priming it, preparing it. But that's only step one. You're just planting the seed, and we use tools to plant those seeds. In order to grow that seed into a nice, big, rooted tree, you need to give it time to set up those roots and to grow. The way that's done is by watering it with immersion, with exposure to the language. I'm a little far into this metaphor, so to be super clear, you need to see and hear words multiple times after initially learning them for them to actually stick with you. Think about how ingrained English words are for you. Believe it or not, there was a time in your life when you didn't know the word house or any other word, but now it feels like you've always known them. They're such a part of your thoughts, yourself. The same will happen in your new language through immersion time. If you're struggling to learn and remember words right now, you're probably not doing enough immersion in content that includes those words. This is why apps like Duolingo don't actually work on their own. When the chief revenue officer of Duolingo was asked, ¿Hablas español? After 6 months of using the app, he had no idea what was said or how to answer. The question was just, do you speak Spanish? He may have been primed on that phrase possibly hundreds of times, but being asked was likely his first experience with that phrase in the real world. But if he'd seen that phrase in videos and TV shows and seen how people actually respond, I'm sure he would have not had to think at all and just been able to answer right away. If you never allow the roots to set and your vocabulary to grow, it's quickly forgotten and not much use at all. In most languages in the world, the 1,000 most common words make up around 80% of all the words said, more or less. These frequent words, however, often have very little information in them. They're just the building blocks of language. They're not fancy or colorful. If you were forced to speak only using the top 1,000 words of the language, it'd be very difficult to actually talk about anything specific. It'd all be generic. Oh, he left a while ago. She's coming too. Where'd he leave from? She's coming with who? Where are they going? But the same is true if you try to do anything without these 1,000 most common words. Those core words are the foundation of every sentence. Trying to sound normal without saying the word the or of or it would be basically impossible. I would have to say something like that sentence there is like all those words. Normal, saying, impossible, something like that. It just doesn't work without those words. Which is why we get those out of the way first, because once you learn the 1,000 common, useful words, then you can start branching out into topics that are more interesting to you. This is when you might learn words like tomato, frying pan, oven, or screen, keyboard, password, depending on your current interests. But you can't really learn those words without knowing of, behind, and. You also should be picky about what words you learn and avoid learning the rare ones. Triskaidekaphobia is technically a word, but you probably shouldn't waste your time with it. This is also why we don't recommend learning animal names or even days of the week right away. Those might seem like preschool level words, but you don't actually need to know them to understand basic conversations. Once you're actually learning to speak and chat with people, days of the week become really useful. But if you're watching a TV show and all the days of the week are basically the same, their fictional Friday is just the same as a Monday. All you need to know is that it's a day. That's it. Okay. Today was actually fairly theory heavy, so we're not adding any new vocabulary tool onto your plate yet. We'll give you more tools for expanding your vocabulary tomorrow, but for today, you're just going to focus on using those word lists or bingo cards from a few days ago. Find words on there that you don't know super well, or maybe even at all. Prime them by looking them up once, and then go search out for them in your immersion content. Plant those roots or let those roots grow and feel the word starting to sprout a little bit more as it makes a bit more sense. But that's all for today. Thank you for listening and coming to day 5, and we're going to be adding on the important pieces to it tomorrow and setting you up for the rest of your language learning journey.